Of course he makes a video complaining about Bretonnia while I'm working on one. I can't even claim I had the idea first. His video's been out for a few weeks at this point. At least this video has less jokes about intimate relations with horses in it.
Anyways, Bretonnia. Land of chivalrous knights, starving peasants, and the Blessed Lady. It may not be the most creative faction in Warhammer Fantasy, but it's hard to deny that they aren't at least a little bit cool. But they've been driving me up the walls ever since I started doing deep dives on their duchies. It's not because they're presented as villains in shining armor, or because I can't pronounce half their names due to French words. No, Bretonnia's been getting on my nerves because they just don't have any variety within their faction. Yeah, there's several flavors of knights, as well as a variety of peasants, but think a bit deeper than that. Is there any way to differentiate an army hailing from Gisero from one serving the Duke of Quenelles? Are any units unique to any particular realm? I'd argue not. Every duchy can field loads of knights errant and knights of the realm, as well as workable contingents of questing knights and Grail knights. There's also the peasants, but they're the same from Garonne to Carcassonne. Poorly armed and armored foot soldiers that crumple beneath the slightest pressure. The only possible exception is Paravon, which is renowned for its Pegasus Knights, but that's it. Of 14 duchies, only one has a meaningful identity on the battlefield beyond being also part of Bretonnia. Considering Warhammer is ultimately a game about pushing in your opponent's face, both on tabletop and in the video game, I think this is a meaningful problem. It makes Bretonnia feel less fleshed out than the rest of the world, prevents you from taking meaningfully themed armies, and might be one of the reasons it has more detractors than other factions. More importantly, it's a personal problem. I like, nay, love, building lore-accurate armies. It's an entire subgenre of videos on this channel. Check them out if you haven't already. So the fact that I can't do a meaningful lore-accurate army on Bretonnia breaks my heart. At the same time, I want to make sure that Bretonnia keeps its identity as that Thurian heavy cavalry civilization. So, with these two needs in mind, how do we make sure each duchy, or at least geographic region, feels unique, without stripping the faction of its identity? Before we dive in, it's worth mentioning that I'm introducing these ideas in order of validity. The earlier ideas leave Bretonnia's identity completely intact, while the ones further down the line are a bit more suspect. Just understand that I'm not married to all of them. They're just being included because it would indeed be a way to make each duchy's army unique, even if not a very good one. Let me know which ones resonate, or don't, in the comments down below. Now, let's get into it. I think the first part of differentiating Bretonnian duchies is adding new, duchy, or at least region-specific mounts. A horse should always be the default Bretonnian mount, of course, but just like wealthy Paravonian knights ride Pegasi, wealthy knights in other duchies should also have unique options. Almost half of Bretonnia is coastline, so the addition of a semi-aquatic mount makes a lot of sense for these duchies. The wife of the first Duke of Lienguil, Theralind, was turned into a sea monster by an evil witch, and is said to still guard the port city to this day. It's established in the lore that the aquatic beasts plaguing the city are her children, so why not have the damsels tame some, and let the most competent knights ride them into battle? This would give Bretonnia a monstrous cavalry option, as well as giving coastal armies, or at least those from Lienguil, a bit more character. If you want a more distinctly horse-like option that could apply to other coastal duchies, Games Workshop could also introduce something like the hippocampus into game, though they'd probably have to be a bit more terrestrial than their mythological counterparts to work in-game. Also, considering their close geographic and diplomatic relations with Athalloran, I'd argue that elite knights from duchies like Quenelles should be able to ride stags into battle. They won't be as big or majestic as those of the Wood Elves, but Grail knights from these provinces should really be able to ride them. They know that the lady has a close relationship with the Wood Elves, and the Fae seem okay enough with Grail knights depending on the lore. This would also lean into Bretonnia being a shield for Athalloran, which Games Workshop has been pushing hard since 6th edition. If the elves are going to use the humans as a body blocker, they should at least let the best, most loyal humans ride on their special steeds. Some could argue that this steps on the toes of Wild Riders and Great Stag Knights, but I'd say otherwise. In my head, Bretonnian Stag Knights split the difference between normal Bretonnian Knights and the Wild Riders. Faster and less armored than other knights, but more defensive and less explosive in their offensive power than elves of a similar caliber.
The addition of new mounts is probably the most visually stunning way of differentiating the armies of each duchy, especially on the tabletop, but it would definitely be the most expensive as well. On the tabletop, it would require new sculpts, lore, and rules. In Total War, it would require the development of new models and animations. These would all be big, splashy projects, but I know Bretonnia's doing alright in the old world, so it would likely sell well. Games Workshop can probably justify the expense, especially if the models are beautiful. Truth be told, that's probably all the designers need to do to differentiate Bretonnia's duchies to my satisfaction. Coastal duchies would be set apart by their sea monsters and hippocampuses, forest duchies by their stag riders, and Paravon by its Pegasus knights. But, if I got complete creative control, I'd like to go a bit deeper than that. After all, there are 14 whole duchies. We should keep adding new things. Introducing new units designed to fight specific enemies would also be a nice way to spice up the duchies. Certain geographic regions within Bretonnia have to deal with certain threats more often than others, and a nod to this would go a long way. Southern Bretonnia, for instance, regularly has to contend with Skaven and Greenskin invasions, so a brotherhood of knights from these duchies that specializes in destroying those kind of opponents would give them a unique character. Likewise, Corone, Lee Angwil, and Leah Ness have to deal with Northskin and Dark Elf raiders, so units designed around countering those factions would also be thematic. Stuff like that. Exactly how this would be implemented in either game is beyond the scope of this video, but I do have a few ideas. On tabletop, these specialty units could have the hatred rule for enemies they're supposed to fight, letting them reroll missed attacks into those factions. In Total War, they could get bonus weapon strength or melee attack when fighting specific factions, though that's more campaign specific. If you wanted these units to function in campaign and multiplayer, they need to be good at countering what their opposed faction usually brings. For instance, an anti-Beastman unit would need to be anti-large, anti-Skaven units would need to be missile resistant, and anti-Warriors of Chaos units would need to have armor-piercing weapon strength. If they wanted to mix it up, Games Workshop could also make Bretonnian nobles from different duchies have distinct fighting styles. They shouldn't all be the best horsemen in the world realistically, that's just nonsensical. Have you seen some of these duchies? A few of them are nothing but forest or mountains, or both. How an army fights is highly dependent on its terrain, and while a cavalry charge is great on open fields, it's less effective in dense woodland, mountainous passes, or on a castle wall. Duchies that are regularly besieged or forced to fight in difficult terrain, like the Knights of Montfort, should have nobles that are comfortable fighting on foot. Foot Knights have already been introduced on tabletop, and Foot Squires do a passable job of being Foot Knights in Total War, but I think there should be even more varieties of heavily armored infantry on the Bretonnian roster. Not enough to supplant the Empire as the infantry human faction, of course, but there should be at least a few like Questing Knight or Grail Knights on foot. They'd be strictly sword and shield, giving them fewer options in the Empire, but it's still something to give Bretonnia more variety on the battlefield. This would let more mountainous duchies field elite infantry armies, which is probably what they should be doing in the lore anyways. Finally, having certain duchies or regions interpret the knightly vows differently would be an interesting way to introduce diversity within the faction. Maybe some duchies don't really accept the belief that ranged weapons are cowardly, and their nobles trained from birth in the use of longbows. This opens up the field to heavily armored foot archers, or even crossbowmen, though the ladies shouldn't smile in these duchies and they should have fewer Grail Knights as a result. Considering the southern duchies of Carcassonne and Brionne keep rebelling against the king whenever stuff like that happens, they'd probably be the ones to get this treatment. Of all my ideas, this is definitely the worst from a lore and identity perspective, but it would definitely be unique. Before I go, I want to say this is a Games Workshop problem, not a Creative Assembly one. I don't want Total War Warhammer to add a bunch of new units that aren't in the lore or tabletop game, so Games Workshop has to make the first move. I'm also not an idiot. I know they won't do what I've suggested. The old world is a side game, and I am a tiny YouTuber with less than 2k subscribers, so I don't exactly have much sway in the community. I made this video for two reasons. One, I've been traveling a lot recently, and will be traveling even more in the future, so I need to make an easier video. Secondly, this is something that's important to me. Almost every other faction in the game can build unique, interesting armies based around certain ideas in their lore. Dwarfs alone have armies based around traditionalism, Kera Kirn, innovation, Zufbar, death cults, Kera Kadrin, and rune magic, Kera Kazul, which is also my army on the tabletop. The Empire can build knightly armies, crusading armies, tech armies, infantry armies, and several more besides. Literally every Skaven clan is unique in some way. I could go on, and I nearly did before editing the script down. I just want Bretonnia to have the chance to do something interesting like the other races, instead of being forced into theming armies around certain steps of the knightly hierarchy. or a peasant revolution. Will these changes ever happen? Almost assuredly not. But I just wanted to get it out there on the off chance that someone does see it and takes my suggestion to heart. Maybe you'll kit bash something for your home tabletop games. Maybe you'll recruit allied units and headcanon them as your own. Maybe no one takes this seriously. All that's important is that I said what I wanted to say and got a video out on time, which was a near thing. As always, thank you to my wonderful patrons, Emmy, Golden Gander, and Unknown. I'm sorry it wasn't a dwarf video, but I can't be under the mountains all the time. Until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.